Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much, as always, for taking the time to tune in. And today I'm delighted to be joined by brand strategy consultant Beatrice Gutknecht, who is here to discuss her thoughts. Some of them might be controversial. I'll just give you that little warning in advance, and experiences on the topic of rebranding. In a world where fitting in is often the norm, Beatrice's why is to challenge that norm and emphasise the importance of doing what's true to oneself rather than what society expects. And that's what she brings to everything that she does. Beatrice works with established service-based B2B businesses who want to shake things up and become the obvious ones in their industry. I love that statement, the obvious ones. And it's about going beyond simply building that strategy. It's implementing it into operations and holding everyone accountable. And it's all because of Beatrice's experience in heading up marketing, sales and operations in hospitality, e-commerce, real estate, developments and other verticals. Her experience also includes spending 12 years living in Southeast Asia, which provides her with a different perspective, and that's what she serves up to her clients every time. Who's Beatrice as a person? She considers herself a dog girl who enjoys quality tequila, not the crappy stuff. And she fell down a rabbit hole that is Akotar. Now, I had to do some research on what that is, and tell me if I get this right. It's a book series called A Court of Thorns and Roses. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
So
Damn.
I'm glad to clarify that. She also loves salsa and bachata dancing, and has lived on 3 continents so far. Beatrice, I'm going to call you B from now on, with your permission, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today.
Gary, thanks so much for having me on. And do that. I think, I probably should just hire you to just do the introduction. That was awesome. Best introduction.
I love it. I love it. So rebranding is something that everyone who's paying attention to anything that's happening in the world would have some level of experience or exposure to, whether it's a slight change in a logo or a target market or something like that. So I'm really hoping that this conversation today resonates. But let's talk about your journey in terms of supplement to what I just shared on your bio there. Why rebranding? What happened to you to take you towards rebranding consultation as a calling?
Oh, we're just jumping right into the violence, right? Straight away. You're like, let's just poke this bear. Well, before getting into how I got into the passion of rebranding, I am very much against rebranding as it is commonly referred to, right? Because if you're going to do a rebrand as it's commonly referred to, depending on who's selling it or who's pitching it, it's either just solely like, the visuals, like, pretty new logo or name or graphics, and everything on the inside is the same. So like, think Twitter to X. Do we have a new word for tweets? No, we don't.
Yeah.
Or if you really want to do a proper rebrand, it means you're gutting the business and all of the trust that you've built for the business. So even if you've been doing something for 2-3 years, you've built up a certain amount of association.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you just haven't been doing any marketing, any communications whatsoever over that time.
Yeah.
So unless you've completely changed your values, you don't necessarily want to be doing a rebrand. And that's why I'm so vehemently against them. Where instead, I would recommend repositioning and refreshing your business overall, including your operations, based on that. And my passion for that came not directly, but over the time in various industries, from hospitality e-commerce, real estate, etc. There's a lot of time in operations, and marketing and brand were always just kind of like jab, jab, jab. Like friends were like, "Oh, can you help me? Like, I want to help with, you know, standing out. We just started our business. We need like a logo, whatever." So it was always just there.
Yeah.
And so finally, when I did pay attention to that after I managed a hotel, I was like, you know what? This is not who I am as a person. Like, I can do it, but it's not firing that little like mini bee, that child version inside of me, which is like, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Right? And we're only doing this life thing once. We might as well be having fun while we're doing it. So then that's when I started to explore, really get into that brand marketing. I was like, oh, I really enjoy this.
Yeah.
Military coup happened. Dad passed away.
Oh my.
And I was like, all shook up. But finally, after all that, I was like, you know what? Why have I been waiting all this time? Like, why just help one business when I can help so many more businesses with standing out in the market, and where they probably will actually listen. Often the time we're in a role and we can give a lot of advice, but maybe the amount of advice that's actually taken
Yeah.
is not quite going to be as much as you could do otherwise. So the direction in terms of like how much operations has come in has been along the way. It's like, well, there's a lot of like brand strategists. What's your unique edge?
Yeah.
And that's that decade plus of that operations experience where the focus is, hey, how can we make sure that we've got this fresh position, we've got this strategy? How do we make sure that it actually works within the business, within your HR, your sales, your marketing,
Yeah.
not just that pretty face,
Yeah.
right? Like that it's actually picked up by the team, which most of the time, that's the problem. So
Yeah.
that is a very short version of the last few years.
I love it. It's the first time I think I've ever experienced anyone saying military coup and my dad passed away with such fun and energy and passion around it, just in the context of the way you were telling the story. So I'm very sorry about the passing of your dad. That's not cool. I've experienced that myself. So in terms then, what I love here, I was just writing some notes down there as you were chatting there, B, in terms of, I think we need to start in terms of rebranding at the why. And I think there's and I think that will obviously it will mean different things to different people in terms of, well, the logo's a bit stale, the website needs a refresh, we acquired these two companies, we should probably update their email, domains, or whatever that looks like. And there's so in terms of the why, is that I'm not preempting anything that you're going to say here, but is that where you start when someone comes and says, "Hey, we need a hand with this"? Is it? Do you start with a why? Do you start with where are you at in your journey? Do you start with extensive research? Do you start with interviews? What does that process look like for you? I know it's probably going to be different for different customers and such, but in general terms, what would your preferred process be?
So first is really understanding whether it is a repositioning that is needed. You know, the reason why rebranding is such a catchphrase, perhaps the word is, at the moment, is as soon as you get a little bored, with your business or your marketing or like your messaging. It's like, oh, how can we refresh this?
Yeah.
So sometimes a rebrand or reposition might not be necessary. It might be like, hey, actually, you do need to check what's going on within your team. There's some kind of lack of communication with your team,
Mhm.
but your direction is just fine.
Yeah.
That being said, most of the time when I'm speaking to people, I do find that rebrand side or the actual, like, this is our strategy behind our brand is non-existent.
Right.
So often is the case. And this is what I only would recommend for businesses when you've been doing it for, well, at least 3 to 5 years,
Mm.
because then you have that experience with clients. You've made the necessary pivots as you do at the beginning. So then it is understanding, okay, what are your goals for the business? What is it that you want to achieve in the long run? Why did you come into this in the very beginning? Like, what did you want to achieve?
Yeah.
Did that somehow disappear along the way? And within that vision, like, okay, what is currently happening within the business? Then when we have a good understanding of, like, okay, the past, the present, the future, then we start working on, like, okay, what's that why, like, as you just mentioned,
Yeah.
that comes into the goals, the vision, mission, and, like, really defining actual values, not we want to be authentic or empathetic, or, like, the values that's pretty much you go to 80% of business websites and you're going to see the values are almost the same.
Yeah.
But do they mean anything? If you go and speak to somebody within the business, are they even going to know it? Like, how do they actually live those values?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah. There's so much. There's so much to it. I was involved professionally in a rebranding. I can't even begin to tell you when it was, probably about 10 years ago, something like that. And it was essentially, it was a necessity because there was a number of companies coming together that were affiliated with each other, and in the industry they were kind of known as being part of the group of companies. And they said, we're actually going to call it one thing now. We're going to call each of these various arms of the company, it's going to be under the banner of a construction company name. So it was essentially, there was a lot more. We got to the tactics quite quickly because the why was established in terms of the necessity, and then we got to the actual literal artwork and the website copy and everything that had to happen in terms of imagery and the truck decals or decals, depending on where you live in the world. It depends what word you use, but the stickers on the trucks and the branding and business cards and email addresses and signature lines. And so we didn't, certainly in my time there, I was really brought on board for the execution part. So it was here's a list of things that we have to do and we have to accomplish them, and this is the logical order and sequencing. In terms of the upfront work of the why, of the values, and of the operations, how the people feel, how they're acting, how they're living or not, to the values, I have no idea. I genuinely don't have any idea of what happened on that. But there was a genuine intention, a genuine desire from leadership at the time to do this right, to bring the team along at the same time, to tell them why it's important. Because some folks are just like, okay, it used to be called this, it's now called that. There's a new logo on the van. Anything else? No, okay, and they would just move on. But the leadership, the CEO and his second in command were very much about, this is more than just a sticker on a truck and a new face on the website. This is an opportunity for us to reaffirm our position in the marketplace and to remind people who we are and were. And interestingly, the name of the company, it was called Stuart Olson Construction, was actually like 100-year-old company at one point. So it had a lot of history and story in Canada and the Canadian construction industry at a point. So they were almost kind of going retro and saying, hey, still here, we're just a little bit different now. So with that said, so my vantage point was more on the tactical, practical implementation. What would you say would be the most common mistake or common mistakes that you see organizations making when it comes to rebranding or repositioning? I love the term repositioning too.
Well, actually, I really want to call out one of the things that you mentioned right at the beginning there, that because they had those different elements, be it like different offers, different products, etc. The fact that they focused on how do these different elements of the business interlink with each other and then restructure based on that. So it sounds like they restructured it as like a branded house where that one overarching brand supplements its name to each of these other areas, right?
Yeah.
So same as like Virgin, right? Virgin as an overarching supplemented to Virgin Atlantic, Virgin, like, so it builds these individual brands that may not necessarily have the same level of awareness without that name.
Yeah.
So that in itself was amazing because I don't see that. A
Mm.
lot of the time, I see organizations with multiple facets, right? People aren't sure what kind of services they offer, what kind of products they offer, because it's all kind of jumbled together. Or
Yeah.
maybe one is completely missing, or maybe even internally, right? Your sales team is talking to your marketing team and they're like, oh, but wasn't that part and this other product having a special kind of promo? Like there isn't the consistent communication. So that initial focus on like, hey, how can we structure this, the brand, so that it works off each other and it's very clear to everybody, it's a massive green flag.
Yeah. Oh, that's
massive green flag right there.
Yeah.
So aside from that, it is the focus on making sure that the team has that buy-in, right? So it's easy enough, again, like say for example, if you're just working with a designer and they call themselves like a brand strategist, but like they're just doing a design, to later find out that the team's not picking it up or they don't know about what's going on. And similar sort of thing is about like what your boss was saying at that time, let's make sure everybody gets it. It's bringing the team into the fold in the process of the reposition, in the process of what that refresh looks like, in the process of what does this actually look like in play, right? So say, for example, if you take that specific position, the point isn't that it should be one monotonous voice, one consistent thing. It should be like, hey guys, this is our new position. It should be like a one-liner, right? What's your take on it? How do you see this playing out in your day-to-day?
Yeah. We actually also had brand consultants, now that I'm remembering. I should have probably did a bit more of a memory dump prior to chatting today, but it's good to do it real time. And they would come in and ask those questions. And in a lot of occasions, certainly in my experience, you're kind of like, that's an odd question to ask. Why does that matter? And they're looking at it from a more holistic perspective. They're looking at it from the various touch points that the organization may have or hopes to have in the marketplace. And some of the questions are very, very deep in terms of, what do you want people to feel when they look at this? How do you want them to act or react? And things like that. And it was such a revelation in terms of the thought process that goes behind marketing, essentially, ultimately, but how you do your marketing via your branding. It was just absolutely fascinating. So in terms of typical mistakes that organizations make in your experience, is it not aligning with, is it not, basically not understanding the why, and then, as you said, they're not incorporating the people and the information from the people within the
Exactly.
organization, that is? Yeah.
So, say for example, if we take a showroom, right? And you're selling watches.
Yeah.
So the people in the showroom, they're just hired there, they got this 9 to 5 or whatever, right? Like they're just there to sell watches, put
Yeah.
it into the till. That's what they know,
Yeah.
right? So imagine if a customer comes in and they're like, oh, like I don't, I'm really frustrated about this part of the process of buying a watch. And they've had a few people say that, but
Mm.
because they've just been hired, that's like, okay, your job is simply to sell these watches, put into like the till, that's it.
Yeah.
That information will never get to the sales team. It will never get to marketing. It will never get to leadership or
Yeah.
even to the brand where you can pivot and adjust based on that.
Yeah.
And that's why it really needs to be as pervasive as possible, getting the entire team's buy-in, even HR. When they're hiring people,
Yeah.
it's not like we're trying to hire, an army of the same people,
Yeah.
but at least with the similar sort of values and the direction, right? The amount of people that actually go to that level of really dedication to this is what we represent, or businesses rather, it's
Yeah.
very limited.
Really. And then what does that come, how does that manifest itself to in terms of outputs? Is it just
Mm.
superficial? Is there a level of disdain or disappointment in the process or the end result or the results that we're
Mhm.
expecting to get versus how does that, I'm assuming in some way there would be a natural path to saying, if you choose to just do this from the C-suite and not really ask anyone and have your particular lens on it, you're going to get this. If you choose to engage, you're going to get that. I know there's no guarantees, of course, but do you see those natural paths depending on the type and style of engagement and communication?
Big time. I mean, the biggest, few examples we've seen recently, like Twitter to X. So I really question how much they've actually integrated the entire team into that process.
Yeah,
Or, even Jaguar, like the history of the brand and, as you were saying for the trucks, right? Like they could have, and they did take that 100 years of history and leverage that
yeah,
and make it like relevant. How can the main issue that Jaguar brought up was like, oh, we want to resonate with younger millennials, with Gen X, with Gen Alpha, etc. You can do that without destroying your entire like brand, like, and what it represents overnight.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So there's that disconnect. As soon as you don't have the team involved, as soon as you try to just completely steer in a totally different direction, you lose that trust.
yeah,
You lose the value of the business. Any business that you've seen, like Twitter, Jaguar, etc., their market value dropped massively.
mhm,
That's going to happen for any kind of business.
yeah. And what's really resonating for me here, B, is I mean, ultimately, we're talking about a level of change management. Change management is something I've been involved in. I've managed projects for over 30 years. And, there's always an element of change. And when you're changing, it could be a difficult change or it could be an easier change. I'll maybe just hesitate and emphasize the word easier rather than easy, where there's a way to do it. What is the change? Why are we
Mm.
changing? What is the level of detail? What is actually changing? What do we expect to see at the other side? What steps do we need to take to move into that? And if you actually genuinely just literally ask yourself those questions, you'll infinitely be better at changing than you would have if you're kind of like, the people will get used to it. They'll kind of see what we're doing and then they'll buy in at the end and everything will be A-okay. And the majority of mine, I think, to your experience in terms of the operations, the majority of that, certainly on the projects I've been managing, have been within an organization. So then how do you find out what the impact, how do you find out what the actual change is and what the impact is going to be? You have to go and ask some questions and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we think is going to happen. Tell us what your experience will be, and then moving forward. So it's genuinely synonymous with change management and the principles of change management to get it right, to get the buy-in, to move forward, to get the input, to get the feedback loops, and course correct as you're going forward to say this is a great idea, this is not so much, we haven't heard of that, why are we doing this, and this might work, this might not work. And that would be back to the example of the watch salespeople saying, well, I'm actually glad you asked. People hate this particularly, they hate the displays, they hate the way that there's never a price tag attached, they hate that there's no specifications listed on, like whatever it is, I'm just making it up, of course.
Yeah.
But that there's so much, what I've been saying, B, for the longest time, and I find myself saying it more and more and more these days, there is so much information that we have access to in life, not just business, but in life in general, and in this human existence that we have, that we just don't tap into. Most of the
Mm.
information we need is there. We just need to know where to look for it, what questions to ask, and what to do with that information once we get it. And it's really, really resonating with me in terms of that for right now. Same for you.
Exactly. And I think it's going to get even worse. You're going to be saying it more because AI is going to be more at the forefront. People are like, oh, it's the solution. So there's questions that we're talking about now, like, oh, what's going on? There's questions to prompt those changes. They're going to be asking AI instead of the team.
Yeah.
Right? And it's
Yeah.
like, guys, they're right in front of you. I mean, you're paying them. You might as well try to get them involved. If they are incredibly shy, maybe just get it as anonymous feedback, like, hey, we just really want to know, and this will also help you for your job, etc., to be paid more in the long run, because we can increase the value of the products or the services, and that means you will get paid more. We
Yeah.
like all of this is a domino effect.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned AI there. I've seen certain things online. The prevalent platform I'm online on is LinkedIn, and I like to see what's happening there. And I seen an advert recently. Well, yes, it was an advert, and it was basically Adidas had produced an entire advert that was selling Adidas products essentially, or the Adidas brand in general, where there's some cool kids dancing with some cool gear on and their shoes and all that. And then afterwards, it said this was generated 100% from AI. There were no actual live human beings on this. And I thought it was great. This person I'm connected with had shared it, and I thought that's incredible. It's great to see that there are options and opportunities to be able to do that. But the interesting thing for me was the other comments that were there. I'm kind of indifferent to it. I will buy Adidas or I won't. It doesn't really matter. I just thought it was kind of unique in terms of the way that they went about it. But some of the comments, there was a lot of really, really strong feelings around the role of AI, and not positively strong feelings. I mean, where people were like, this is ridiculous, it's quite disingenuous, I didn't feel anything when I watched this advert. And the whole time I'm scrolling, I'm just very, very quickly scrolling through some of the comments. The whole time I'm thinking, but this is exactly what Adidas wanted. They wanted you to be talking about the product. They wanted you to be thinking about it. They wanted you to, in some way, have a reaction to it that would, for the people who are into that, that would make you type on a keyboard and have someone else react to that. And then all of a sudden, you're a hot topic again. So in terms of AI, what major changes do you see coming from a branding, rebranding perspective in industry with the introduction of AI?
I do see it being more prevalent in brands, like as you've seen with Adidas. Coke's
Yeah,
done it as well. It's been very prevalent. And in that same hand, I see the human side becoming more important, becoming more relevant.
yeah.
So you were just talking about Adidas.
Mm,
I just posted, I think it was yesterday, about Puma, who they just dropped the biggest marketing campaign in a decade, apparently.
right.
They've been quiet for a long time. And suffice to say that the ad is basically similar to anything that you would see on like a Nike or Adidas, and it's just like, motivational or like running shit. Like I can't even remember the
Yeah,
details. Like it's that kind of ad. And yes, they redefine like their position that it is like, okay, it's about speed, but the ad didn't show anything like that. And the point is, in such a very close market, that's the most important. It's like, hey, how can we really double down on that position? If they want to focus on speed, where Nike is focused on like inclusion, right?
yeah,
Don't do inclusion as well, right? Focus on, hey, let's get work with partners in terms of how fast we can do this. Guinness World Record book, fastest XYZ. Similar as like Red Bull, right? You know that they're going to work with people, companies, etc., that are around dangerous sports.
extreme.
Extreme sports. There we go. My
Yeah,
brain was like,
yeah.
nope. Around extreme sports. Okay, so for Puma, what can we do around the speed side of things? Because even you think about Puma, like the name, the icon, it's like everything is around speed. Why not lean into that idea? Then you're
Yeah,
getting connected to a certain kind of person. It's like, I want to be faster. I want to do a faster lap in the pool. I want to be faster at like the fastest person to complete a chess game.
yeah.
Right? You're resonating with those people. It's not just trying to get into the tailcoat of like, hey, let's be inclusive, because now that's what every brand this is our big thing.
Yeah. So one of the main key themes here is obviously your operational experience, your operational background has given you that opportunity to see the gap between what leadership are doing and how it's implemented or not within the operational workforce. How do you see? Because I can imagine someone watching or listening to this podcast be and saying, "Yeah, that's a great idea to speak to everyone to try and get the information. We have 1,300 employees here who are spread across 17 different time zones and 5 different continents and such and there's all these different cultures to get, and we don't have time to do that, but we know we need to do some sort of proactive position in the workplace to give ourselves an opportunity to be heard and seen and considered
Mm-hmm.
and the go-to organization. So I see that being one bit of a barrier. And then you're kind of a proponent of saying it's not going to work properly if you don't do a version of that. So how would you advise a client who maybe has those hesitations or barriers that are in place in the beginning?
Mm-hmm. So if you have that number of employees, you're not going to be managing them all yourself,
Yeah,
right? So I would clearly define some measures, questions that you can pass down to, say, for example, the heads of different areas.
yeah,
And they can be like, okay, so we have these 5 questions. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't make like 50 questions. Nobody's got the time for that, right?
Yeah.
Hone it down to like the 5 key things and leave some space open. Like have the 6th question is like, is there any feedback for us? Just keep it like that part wide open. Like any kind of feedback, we're not going to come hunt for you. Just don't put any names.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and try to collate them, see what is consistent over these different continents or over these different teams. Because
Yeah.
by doing that, then you're going to see the things that are happening consistently. It doesn't matter about whether it's the Southeast Asian market or the American market, or maybe with a certain region, you need to make some adaptations because perhaps in that region, it doesn't have the same effect because the words mean different things
Yeah.
in different cultures,
Yeah.
be it Europe versus America or Southeast Asia versus the Middle East. Everybody's going to perceive things very differently, even within the same country.
Yeah.
From one part of the country to the other part of the country, the way things are perceived are going to be quite different, and you're going to need to take the time to explore those individually.
Yeah. It reminds me of the story I read about a number of years ago regarding Starbucks before they had entered into any other type and style of drinks other than coffee, other than warm or hot coffee, where they had, I think it was in California somewhere, where the local Starbucks at the time, probably not as many stores as they have now, had said they'd met one of their regular customers, says, I haven't seen you for a while, where have you been? And they said, oh, it's too warm in the summer for coffee. So I go and I get my caffeine kick from this place here where, they blend it together and it's a nice drink. And that's what I get in the morning. And they're like, we should try that. So they go get some blenders, they put some menu together. And then, very, very long story short, it goes up to the board of Starbucks and they say, this is a winner. People are looking for this. People are like, here's the sales numbers. This is what we could do. This is what we did just in this one shop. And Starbucks voted it down. Like, the board was like 9-1 or something like that, saying, no, we're a coffee company. We don't do any of this. So then they went back and said, look, we hear you. We really appreciate what you're doing. You've been instructed to put the blenders away and get back to regular business. So they kind of fake put the blenders away, and then as soon as leadership left, they brought them back out. And they said, so talk about bottoms up leadership, where they said you have to trust us. This works, and they kept going and kept going, and eventually it became forgive me, I don't know all the names of Starbucks, but like the Frappuccino and the iced coffees, and it's a multi-billion part of their revenue on an annual basis, where exactly what you were saying there, be where this geographic nuanced area said, we miss the customers, we want to serve the customers, this is what they're actually asking for, why don't we provide them with that? It's a brilliant story, and with one of the most storied brands that's recognizable today in the world, and they basically, within, even when they were told no, they basically in a very polite way probably said, you're dead wrong. You're dead wrong, and you need to trust us. And then eventually it went back up, and here we are today with an abundance of choice when you go into Starbucks now.
I think that's a thing for Starbucks because I have another story about Starbucks and them trying to enter the Australian market.
Right.
So at first they were trying to expand to like all the countries and try to enter the Australian market, but they weren't having any success because they didn't understand that Australia already has a very rich coffee culture and is very different to the Americanized, like, oh, there's so much sugar in the coffee. Like, it's already established. There's a very, like, this is our range. This is what, like, we drink.
Yeah.
And they weren't successful. They only, I believe, have Starbucks set up in the very, like, the tourist spots.
Right.
Finally, now in Australia. they couldn't succeed in the rest of the country.
Yeah.
So really understanding that culture, what's going to work, what's not going to work,
Yeah.
testing out,
Yeah,
and maybe
definitely.
listening to your team.
That would be a good idea. It would save you a lot of time and hassle at times. You know, it's so incredible. Again, there's so much rich information out there that you could use at any given point in time to give yourself the best opportunity to do the right thing and get internal buy-in, which it doesn't just stop internally. If you get people excited from an operational perspective about what they're doing as a company, they're going to tell other people about it, over drinks,
Just
over
gonna do it
coffee, over,
anyway. That's so
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So, in terms of if someone is sitting here today listening or watching us and saying, I'm actually contemplating, or I'm just at the very early stages of my rebranding slash repositioning journey, what would you say other than please get in touch with Bea and she will help you? What would be the very first thing you would say before you do anything else? Do this first or very early on.
I would say check how much your brand is being mentioned. So set up Google Alerts, set up like the trackers, and see how often your business is being spoken about.
Yeah,
Right? It's very easy to say, yeah, we're getting sales, but that just probably means you're spending a ridiculous amount on sales or on ads, which you might not necessarily need to. So I would say check that first and ask a lot of questions. Ask your team what's going on. Really have a check that are you aligned with what you originally came into business for? Obviously, there's going to be pivots,
yeah,
but that overall goal should still be there.
yeah, absolutely. And to supplement that, in terms of managing expectations of people,
Mhm.
the time it gets, the time it needs, I should say, for people to genuinely invest in doing the foundational work that's going to give them the information and buy-in and strategies and such to be able to make this a success. How do you navigate that with clients to say, your time estimate and my time estimate are probably going to be different. Let's talk about why. How does that go in terms of the actual genuine time and duration commitment?
Brand strategy, it is a long-term commitment. There is no way around it. People are just like 90, like they see on social media, whatever, we can do this within 90 days, within 60 days. But is it going to last? You take any of the brands who are where they are now, they've spent decades getting there with their brand. They're like being consistent.
Yeah,
So the way I approach it is it's going to be, at least the 12 months. But
right.
there will be from the get-go, we're going to make sure that we're adapting as we go. So it's not just like, hey, 6 months from now, we're going to release a rebrand. That's a terrible idea to me, right?
Yeah,
I see it as like from day one, we're going to what we discuss. Okay, how can we adapt this in your business? What are the key actions, the takeaways from that? So that you're growing, you're building that awareness, you're building that trust, you're building that association, and you're building the value from day one.
yeah,
It's not like you're waiting 12 months for that. So you should be seeing that progressive growth
yeah,
rather than going with someone like, hey, 60 days XYZ, quick win, and then nothing.
yeah,
Or, hey, we're going to rebrand and like it's going to take us 6 months and you'll see the results in 6 months. No,
yeah,
slow progression. But there
yeah,
will be progression that I can promise.
yeah. I love it. I love it. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of rebranding and how you feel about rebranding and such. But as we draw to the end of this of course is the Best You podcast. And what I like to do is ask every single guest, what regular practice do you employ that gives B the best opportunity to be the B that she needs to be and the B that her clients need to be? So, what do you regularly do?
It's a lot of B's.
There is.
The biggest thing for me is to question myself, question every interaction, question what we're presented. You know, it comes into that social norm of like, here are the regular things, like everybody else in the industry are doing this, and they've been doing this for years. And most business will be like, okay, that's just how it's always been done.
Yeah.
Can't we question that? Can't we be like, why are we doing it like this? Is there an easier way? I mean, especially now with how much things have changed.
Yeah.
Is there a different way? Can we be positioned earlier in the buyer journey compared to everybody else? And it is very possible, because I've done this with clients where it's like, hey, you know, everybody else is positioned here on this is the track. Maybe we can be positioned earlier. Or how about we kind of blend industries, take some ideas from an industry which is completely unrelated, and use that to spice things up.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing for me is always just question everything. And that's led me to start Badassery by B. It's led like clients to just really double think, because it is going beyond that first answer. Because the first answer is never the answer.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had that when you're working with like change management. It's like, but is that really, or is that just your first go-to like line of defense answer?
Yes. Yeah, 100%, absolutely. And question everything, it absolutely aligns with there is much more rich data out there that you can tap into relatively easily if you indeed ask the right questions of the right people and prove and demonstrate you're going to do something meaningful with it. You know, people will trust you with information then that they maybe might not under other circumstances.
And that's what this first line here is sapere aude. It means dare to know.
Dare to know. Oh, I love that. I love that. Absolutely wonderful. So before I let you go, B, where can people find out more about you?
3 places. One is LinkedIn for day-to-day. There's post breakdowns, that sort of thing. They're usually shorter format. Number 2 is the newsletter that drops every Friday directly to your inbox, which has a breakdown or behind the scenes strategy, tactic, including how to implement said strategy into each department. So be it marketing, be it sales, operations, etc.
Yeah.
And third, if you're like an audio person, the Art of Branding podcast, which is going to be restarting soon for season 3.
Fabulous. I love it. B, thank you very, very much. I was looking forward to this particular podcast. It did not disappoint, of course. Your energy and the information shared is just absolutely fantastic. Thanks a million for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.